What's up, you guys? Robert here. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to make some barbecue pulled pork tacos. Now, before we get started, shout out to Chef Tom at All Things Barbecue. This is a spin-off of one of his recipes, so if you guys haven't checked him out yet, I'd highly recommend it. This guy is a master of barbecue. Let's get started. Okay, you guys, so the first thing that you're going to want to do is go ahead and just glove up, one clean hand, one dirty hand, and then start patting this pork butt dry. It's going to make it a lot easier for us to work with, so it's not slipping around in our hands. Now, the first thing that we're going to be working on is getting rid of this fat cap. This fat cap is unnecessary because of all the intermuscular fat that runs through a pork butt, and we'll trim that off. The last thing that we'll do is actually separate the body and the money muscle down here. First, we're going to be starting with the fat cap though, and just cutting this down to the bare muscle. Now again, this fat cap is unnecessary. We don't need it to render to try and baste and juice up this pork butt, since we have a couple of different things going on here. First of all, like I said earlier, the pork butt has a lot of intramuscular fat running through it already, so we really don't need this additional fat on top of it. The other reason is because we're going to be injecting the pork butt with some pork injection along with some prime dust. So this is going to help really actually add some additional flavor and juices into this pork butt, making the rest of this fat completely unnecessary. Now, once you're done removing the fat cap, go ahead and continue to trim off any sort of hard pieces of fat that you feel around this, and you can trim this as much or as little as you really want to. Now, when it comes to separating the two muscles, the method that I have found works the best is to use one hand to pull back on the body, and this is going to expose where the fat actually runs in between the two pieces. What you can do is just go ahead and cut along that entire fat line, as you can see, and as you pull back on the body, it's going to expose the rest of the fat, making this really easy. Once you're done, go ahead and cut sideways into this and cut away all that fat that you see until you hit nothing but pure muscle. Now you know that you've got a full separation, and then you can go ahead and start cutting out all of the fat and the silver lining. All of this fat and silver lining is completely unnecessary between these two for the same reasonings as before. We want to make sure that we get rid of all unnecessary fat. The silvering is going to be really chewy later, which you don't want to be serving to your guests anyways. And this is going to help us be able to get more seasoning and more smoke directly to the meat that we want. Now today we're going to be working with two injections from Butcher's Barbecue, a prime dust and a pork injection. Go ahead and put 1 scoop of each into a shaker bottle and mix this up. When it comes to injecting the pork, you're going to want to work this in a grid pattern. Working this in a grid pattern ensures that we're getting an even spread of injection across the entire meat. As we're injecting this, you guys will notice that there's a lot of the injection that's coming back out underneath the pork butt. That's okay, it's to be expected. It doesn't mean that you're missing the meat. All it means is that this pork butt in that one area is full of the injection and it's getting rid of anything it doesn't need. Once you're done injecting, go ahead and grab some paper towels and just absorb all of that additional moisture that's unnecessary on top of and around the pork butt. Reasoning being is that we're about to season this thing, and you don't want all this additional moisture that kind of gets in the way and clumps up all of our seasoning. We're going to be using a combination of 2 different types of seasoning, some grill your ass off seasoning and some bovine bold. Both of these mixtures are just a little sweet. The grill your ass off is a little bit chunkier. You may need to take a fork and kind of break this up a little bit just prior to actually seasoning the pork butt, but with this being the more coarse seasoning, we're going to layer this on first just to try and get as much of it as we possibly can in, and then we'll come back with this bovine bold to fill in all of the gaps as a finer seasoning. You'll notice that I use kind of a typewriter method and just coming across this entire thing and then come back in the opposite direction. You want to make sure that you get a really good spread on this to have tons of seasoning. Now this is a very large piece of meat, so we can put a lot of seasoning on this thing. Make sure that you do not over season it though. We don't want to create such a layer of seasoning to the point where the smoke isn't going to be able to penetrate it. Now you know that the seasoning is tacked up and you're ready to flip when all the seasoning looks really wet like this. Once you're at that stage, and it's about 15 minutes or so, go ahead and flip this guy over and then start seasoning the other side. We're going to use the exact same method in using the grill your ass off first, and then we'll come back with the bovine bold just to get the finer grains of seasoning in between all of this thicker stuff. Now don't forget to season also in between the two pieces of meat that we actually cut it open with. We want to get a good amount of seasoning in here just because the more coverage, the better off that you are. And then actually at the very end, I'm going to go ahead and throw a couple of toothpicks into the body part just to actually hold the flap back a little bit. So that way while it's smoking, we're actually going to get just a little more smoke flavor in between those two pieces. Once done, go ahead and transfer this to a baking sheet. We're going to put this in the fridge and let it rest overnight. So it's about 6 a.m. We're going to go ahead and get the smoker prepped. I'll be cooking on the Camp Chef DLX. Dump the ashtray, set this to high smoke. For me, it's high smoke 220. And what we're going to do is go ahead and throw this pork butt on. Now you'll notice that I have a smoke tube on here, which personally I like to utilize with the larger pieces of meat, just to help punch a little bit of more smoke flavor and get that seasoning tacked up so we can start spraying it a little bit sooner. All right, so for this part of the cook, we're really going for color rather than time or temperature. If those are things that you're worried about, you can expect the pork butt to be somewhere around 155 when we pull it, and this will take somewhere around 4 to 6 hours. The biggest thing is just establishing a dark mahogany color across the pork butt. Now I pinned back the meat where we had cut out that little middle section just to try and expose a little more meat and get some more smoke and flavor in there. But what we're going to be doing is in about 3 hours, once the bark starts getting established and we can see that all that seasoning is tacked up, we're going to start spraying down the pork butt about every 30 minutes or so, just to establish a little more flavor on there and help the pork butt retain more moisture. All right, now while the pork butt is smoking, we're gonna go ahead and work on our coleslaw. Very first thing is gonna be to quarter up your red cabbage here. You can do this by cutting it in half first, and then taking those halves and cutting them in half again. Once you have the quarters, go ahead and take off the outer layer just because that's what's been sitting around in the grocery store and you probably just don't want to be throwing that into the actual coleslaw. Then cut it lengthwise, turn it sideways, and then go ahead and shred this thing up. Once done, we're going to be adding 1 cup of shredded carrots. Now, whether you buy a pre-shredded bag like I did or you buy a carrot and shred it yourself, doesn't really matter. Now, we're going to be adding 1 cup of sugar and then half a cup of garlic salt. Be sure to put a glove on for this part just because we're going to be mixing it up. When you're mixing this, be sure to really crunch that cabbage to make sure that you're infusing all of that sugar and salt that we just dumped in there. Once you're done mixing all of this, we're going to add 1 cup of crushed pineapple in our barbecue sauces, which today we're going to be using Plowboy's Tar Heel Tang, some Colorado bourbon, and add some fajita mix. Once you go ahead and mix this up again, just get this thing covered. We're going to throw this in the fridge for the next couple of hours to allow all of those flavors to tack up, mix in, and kind of integrate with each other. Now the next thing that we're going to be working on is our mop sauce spray. So I'm just going to be using 1 cup of pineapple juice with some barbecue sauce. Reasoning for the pineapple juice is actually because of the acidic values in that pineapple. It's going to help break it down. The whole reason for spraying down the pork butt is just to add some additional flavor, and it's going to give it a really good shine. Now I go ahead and actually strain out the mixture just because, as you can see, there's a lot of seasoning inside of that barbecue sauce. When you actually go to filter this out and then you pour it back in the bottle, you'll notice that a lot of the seasoning actually rests to the bottom of this bowl and filters it out even just a little bit more. Just to help out with the thicker barbecue sauces and more seasoning, also remove the cap on the end of your spray bottle just to help it along. Now to check on the pork butt, you want to make sure that you have this clear blue smoke rolling, just because the thicker white clouds is not good. Now you know that your pork butt is ready to spray when it looks like this. As you can see, the seasoning looks nice and stiff and tacked up, so we know that when we go to spray this isn't going to remove all of that seasoning and bark that we worked so hard to get. Now you're going to want to be spraying down the pork butt about every 30 minutes. Now it's been about 5 hours or so. This pork butt is looking really good, you guys. It looks tacked up. There's small water pockets around it. We have a nice dark mahogany color, so we're going to go ahead and get this thing pulled. Now when it comes to actually wrapping it in tinfoil, I like to double wrap this, so lay down the 2 sheets of tinfoil and put down the pork butt. We're going to go ahead and remove those toothpicks that I had put in there to hold that meat back, because we don't need it anymore. And then we're going to be using the same pineapple juice from earlier and adding in about another cup. Now the reasoning for this is just the exact same reasonings as it was before when spraying it down. If we add in about a cup of pineapple juice and wrap it in the tinfoil, this is going to go ahead and baste that pork butt to soften it up even more, and it's going to make it even easier to shred later on, just because of the acidic values inside of pineapple juice. Now when wrapping it, be extremely careful, you guys, not to actually puncture anything and we lose all of those juices. You'll want to probably just rub your hands across the entire pork butt and just get familiar with if there's any sort of like burnt ends, something that can actually puncture through it. But you do want to make sure that you wrap this thing incredibly tight. Any sort of steam that forms inside of the tinfoil is going to ruin the bark that we just made. So just give this thing a good squeeze all the way around. Be sure you didn't puncture it and get it tight. Now go ahead and throw this back on the smoker. Obviously at this point in time, the smoker is actually unnecessary, so you could throw this in the oven if you wanted to, but if you are going to throw it back on the smoker, I like to give it a good scrub, just because some of those smaller pieces on your grill could actually puncture this tinfoil when you go to lay it down. Once you have your pork butt either in the oven or back on the grill, go ahead and throw a temperature probe in there just to be able to monitor this. We're going to want this pork butt to finish out somewhere between 203 and 210. Then go ahead and crank this up to 250, and you can expect this to take at least another 4 to 5 hours. Now the pork butt, you guys, has reached a temperature of 203, and we're really looking for a temp anywhere between 203 and 210 is when you know that this pork butt is actually done. Another way that you can tell is once you actually go and get this unwrapped, that blade bone that was inside of the money muscle, if that pulls out easily, then you know that the pork butt is done. What we're going to do is just go ahead and loosely wrap this guy and then throw it inside of a cooler just to keep this warm for the next 30 minutes or so and allow all those juices to settle. In the meantime, while that's all settling, we're also going to start working on our tortillas. Now, we're just working with some standard tortillas that I got from the grocery store. We're going to lay down some butter inside of the pan and go ahead and throw those guys in there. Now, the reasoning why we're doing this is because this is actually going to stiffen up our tortillas just a little bit to kind of help with all the juices that we have flowing through the coleslaw, the pork butt, the barbecue sauce that we're going to be adding, everything. So you'll see that the tortilla is starting to bubble up here. That's all the steam that's actually working inside of the tortilla here, and this is how you know when it's done. So when it starts to bubble up like this is usually when I like to pull it. Okay, so now it's time to go ahead and start shredding up the pork butt, the best part. So go ahead and glove up. I've got some cotton gloves underneath my plastic gloves, just because this pork butt gets insanely hot. It should still be insanely hot. So you definitely want to go ahead and just protect yourselves. Get yourself some cotton gloves, you guys. You can buy a pack of these for super cheap. I think I bought this pack for like $5 at a barbecue store down the street from my house. Once you got it all transferred into a pan, which is at least personally where I like to keep it all, just because then after this I can go ahead and cover it. Just go ahead and start working into this meat, you guys. You know that it's cooked and all the way done if you can pretty easily just dig your fingers into it, and this thing just shreds apart. All right, time to start assembling the tacos. We're gonna go ahead, throw down a nice little healthy portion of our pulled pork, add a little coleslaw on the side. Go ahead and be sure to taste test this coleslaw first, see if you need to add any sort of seasonings. I like to add just a little more barbecue sauce right on top of all of this, help punch that flavor. It's super tangy, really good, you guys. If you haven't tried it yet, I would highly recommend it. And then no tacos complete without a little topping of some shredded cheese. And there you have it. An amazing, easy taco to make. Absolutely delicious. Cheers. Guys, thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Hope you liked the video. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Support my channel, and in the comments, let me know what you think of the recipe. If there's something that you did different, something that I should do different. Always appreciate it. See you guys in the next video.